In the late 2010s, across American retail shelves from Best Buy to the Apple Store, the most expensive computer speakers ever successfully sold to the public quietly disappeared. For nearly 2 decades, the Bose Companion series had dominated the desk. At $399 for a flagship set, they were an absurd proposition for desktop audio. Yet, Americans bought them by the millions. Then, the production lines in Framingham, Massachusetts stopped. The familiar angled grills vanished from catalogs. The heavy aluminum control pods were tossed into desk drawers. But the paradox of the Bose Companion is that it did not fail because the drivers degraded or because the acoustic engineering lost its scale. It vanished because the physical space it was built to dominate, the American workstation, had gone completely silent. But the real story of the Bose Companion is not just the discontinuation of a premium speaker line. It is the story of how the American office lost its privacy, how the desktop moved into a backpack, and how the pursuit of high-fidelity computer audio was ultimately defeated by a pair of noise-canceling headphones. Every week, we tell the stories of American speakers, audio brands, and listening rooms that once shaped how people heard music, movies, and memory. And what happened when the market moved on. Subscribe if that history matters to you. The story of the Bose Companion begins not with a computer, but with a realization inside an acoustic laboratory in Framingham, Massachusetts in 1999. In 1999, the American Home Office was undergoing a violent transformation. The desktop computer was no longer just a word processor or a spreadsheet calculator. It was rapidly becoming a multimedia machine. The CD-ROM drive Word. The early MP3 files downloaded slowly over dial-up connections. The video game soundtrack demanded attention. Yet, the physical delivery of that sound was almost always an afterthought. A family in a Chicago suburb might spend $2,000 on a heavy gateway, Dell or compact tower, only to experience its audio through a pair of hollow, gray plastic speakers bundled in the box for free. These generic desktop speakers cost the computer manufacturers perhaps $15 to produce. They featured paper cones, flimsy plastic cabinets, and no internal damping. The bass was non-existent. The mid-range was muddy. The treble was a harsh, fatiguing hiss. The beige tower, the dial-up modem, the cheap plastic speaker. This was the holy trinity of the early American digital experience. The desk had become the center of entertainment. But the sound it produced was thin and entirely disconnected from the promise of high fidelity. The problem was not merely cheap materials. The problem was the physical environment of the desk itself. An American workstation is a fundamentally hostile acoustic space. A large, hard wooden or laminate surface reflects high frequencies directly into the listener's chest, causing immediate distortion, unwanted change added to the sound by the speaker, amplifier, or room. A heavy CRT monitor sits right in the middle, physically blocking the center audio image. Furthermore, the user is locked into what engineers call near-field listening, a setup where the listener sits very close to the speakers, minimizing the effect of the room's walls on the sound. For decades, traditional American hi-fi had relied on the architecture of the living room to help build the stereo illusion. A floor-standing wooden cabinet needed space to breathe. The distance between the couch and the speakers allowed the left and right channels to blend. But on a desktop, there was no space. There was only a keyboard, a mousepad, a glowing screen, and a listener trapped in a rigid 2-foot acoustic triangle. 200 miles away from the nearest major computer manufacturer, inside an acoustic laboratory in Framingham, Massachusetts, the Bose Corporation observed this discrepancy. By the late 1990s, Amar Bose and his engineering teams had already spent 3 decades convincing American living rooms that massive sound did not require massive wooden boxes. They had built a retail empire on psychoacoustics, the scientific study of how the human brain perceives, filters, and localizes sound. The core Bose philosophy was built on reflected energy. In a traditional living room setup, their famous 901 speakers bounce sound off the back and side walls to simulate the spaciousness of a concert hall. But the computer desk offered no such canvas. If Framingham wanted to conquer the American home office, they had to figure out how to make a near-field environment feel vast without relying on the walls. They had to manipulate the audio signal electronically before it ever physically pushed the air. The early engineering iterations of what would become the companion line were not merely scaled-down living room speakers. They were a fundamental rethinking of how audio should behave when the listener is immobilized in an office chair. The engineers at Framingham recognized that if they could not bounce sound around the room, they would have to digitally expand the soundstage. The perceived width, depth, and placement of music created by a stereo system. They also knew the American office worker would not tolerate large woofers, large drivers designed to reproduce low frequencies such as bass and drums, taking up valuable real estate beside the keyboard. So Bose applied their existing Acoustimass strategy to the PC market. They moved the heavy magnetic components and low-frequency drivers into a separate heavy module designed to be kicked, ignored, and hidden under the desk, leaving only two small, elegant satellite speakers visible beside the screen. When Bose formally pushed its multimedia speaker systems into the American retail channel around the turn of the millennium, the sticker shock was immediate. In the aisles of CompUSA, Circuit City, and Best Buy, rows of generic PC speakers from Altec Lansing and Creative Labs were usually priced around $29 or $49. When consumers reached the Bose end-cap display, they found an entirely different proposition. The entry-level Companion 2 launched at roughly $99. The more ambitious 2.1 systems quickly pushed toward $299. At a time when consumers expected computer speakers to be a disposable accessory, Bose asked them to pay premium audio component prices. The packaging did not boast about gigahertz, megabytes, or processor speeds. It promised high fidelity for the workstation. And despite the steep cost, early adopters began to swipe their credit cards. Video editors in Los Angeles, college students in Boston dorm rooms, and financial analysts in Manhattan began to realize that the computer was quietly replacing the traditional stereo rack. By the early 2000s, Apple's colorful iMac had already proven that computer hardware could be an aesthetic lifestyle choice, not just a utilitarian box. The American consumer was suddenly willing to spend money to make their workspace look and feel premium. Bose recognized this psychological shift perfectly. They were not selling computer peripherals. They were selling a miniature hi-fi system disguised as a peripheral. When a customer walked into a retail store and heard a demonstration of a Bose desktop system playing a high-quality CD track, the contrast with the rest of the aisle was violently clear. The cheap plastic speakers sounded like toys. The companion system sounded like a room. The gamble was immense. To succeed, the company had to change the fundamental economic expectation of the American computer buyer. They had to prove that the space beside the keyboard was just as acoustically valuable as the space beside the television. Bose was about to prove that an American office worker would pay living room prices for desktop sound, provided the sound felt larger than the screen. When the Bose Companion 3 and later the flagship Companion 5 arrived in the mid-2000s, they did not look like standard computer peripherals. They looked like miniature architectural sculptures. In an era when most American desks were cluttered with beige plastic towers, tangled wires, and flimsy accessories, the Companion satellites were mounted on heavy, angled metal stands. They tilted upward at precisely the right angle to fire sound directly toward the listener's ears. The grills were stamped metal, not cheap cloth. But the aesthetic was only the packaging for a radical technological argument. Bose engineers knew they could not defeat the acoustic limitations of the American home office with driver quality alone. They needed to bypass the physics of the room entirely. To do this, they deployed a proprietary technology called TrueSpace, which relied heavily on DSP. DSP digital signal processing, is an internal computer chip that alters the audio signal in real time to trick the human brain into hearing sound from places where no physical speaker exists. When an American listener sat in the rigid near-field triangle of their desk, the true space circuitry manipulated the timing and phase of the left and right audio channels. It pushed the stereo image, the illusion that sounds come from places between and around two speakers, far beyond the physical boundaries of the computer monitor. A user watching a DVD or listening to a downloaded iTunes track would swear they were hearing a center channel speaker directly behind their screen and surround speakers hovering just over their shoulders. To support this grand illusion, Bose removed the bass from the desktop entirely. They utilized a heavy, floor-dwelling subwoofer, a speaker designed to reproduce very low bass frequencies, which they branded as an acoustimass module. Because low frequencies are largely directional blind to the human ear, the heavy wooden module could be kicked under a desk, hidden behind a wastebasket, or tucked next to a filing cabinet, while still making the desktop feel like it was moving massive amounts of air. Furthermore, the flagship Companion 5 bypassed the computer's internal audio hardware altogether. In the mid-2000s, the sound cards built into standard American PC motherboards were notoriously noisy. They picked up electronic interference from the hard drive, the cooling fans, and the power supply. The Companion 5 connected via a single USB cable, routing a pure digital signal out of the computer and into its own internal DAC. A DAC, a digital-to-analog converter, translates the ones and zeros of a digital audio file into the electrical voltage that physically moves the speaker driver. By handling the conversion externally inside their own hardware, Bose guaranteed that the audio quality was controlled entirely by Framingham engineers, not by a cheap Taiwanese motherboard. But perhaps the most brilliant engineering decision was not acoustic at all. It was tactile. For a decade, the American computer user had controlled their volume by clicking a tiny digital slider on a monitor screen, or by turning a flimsy, scratchy plastic wheel wired into a lightweight plastic speaker. Bose eliminated this friction. They introduced the control pod. The control pod was a heavy, weighted disc that sat elegantly next to the keyboard. Its outer ring was wrapped in premium rubber. To raise the volume, the user turned this ring, which glided with the smooth, hydraulic resistance of a high-end stereo receiver. The top of the pod was a touch-sensitive metal plate. A simple tap of a single finger would instantly mute the system. It featured a headphone jack and an auxiliary input carved directly into its face. This single, brilliant piece of mechanical design changed the psychological relationship between the American worker and their computer. The control pod was a tactile innovation. It transformed the mundane act of adjusting desktop volume into a premium physical experience. It made the computer feel like a serious, dedicated hi-fi system. This premium illusion was backed by an aggressive retail strategy that completely bypassed the discount bins. You did not find the Companion 5 stacked on a wooden pallet at Walmart. Bose targeted the most lucrative, high-traffic retail environments in America. They secured prime placement inside Best Buy's Magnolia listening rooms, the high-end audio sections designed to sell expensive home theaters. They dominated the end caps at CompUSA and Circuit City. Most importantly, they conquered the Apple Store. In the mid-2000s, the Apple Store was becoming the ultimate American retail cathedral for premium technology. The iMac was aluminum and glass. The iPod was polished steel. The Bose Companion line, with its graphite finishes and heavy metal stands, was one of the few third-party audio products that looked like it belonged on the exact same display table. The price was staggering. In 2006, the Companion 5 retailed for $399, at a time when the federal minimum wage was just over $5 an hour. This was an absurd proposition. Adjusted for inflation, it was the equivalent of nearly $600 modern dollars, just for computer speakers. For that exact same price, an American consumer could buy a full-sized Sony or Yamaha home theater receiver to power an entire living room. Traditional audiophiles scoffed. They filled early internet forums with complaints that Bose was selling cheap paper drivers masked by heavy equalization, blowing up the mid-range and artificially exaggerating the bass. They argued the price was pure marketing, a triumph of DSP illusion over honest acoustic engineering. But the American mass market did not care about forum complaints. The market cared about the result. The companion system solved the desk. It required no heavy amplifier, no speaker wire cutting, and no complex spatial calibration. You plugged it into the wall outlet, you plugged it into the USB port, and your cubicle suddenly sounded like a cinema. The adoption was rapid, visible, and elite. The Companion line quickly became the undisputed desktop standard across multiple American listening communities. It was adopted by video editors working in Hollywood production bays, audio engineers sketching tracks in home studios, Wall Street financial analysts who wanted premium sound in their corner offices, Silicon Valley software developers writing code late into the night, and Ivy League college students whose entire entertainment world was compressed into a single dorm room laptop. Bose had successfully taken the prestige of the American living room and shrunk it down to a 2-foot radius. The badge on the metal grille was no longer just audio branding. It was a visible sign of professional success on the American desk. By 2008, the Bose Companion line had achieved something few American audio products ever managed. It had completely monopolized a specific physical space. The battle for the American living room was heavily fractured among heritage brands. Consumers could buy Klipsch horn speakers, born in Hope, Arkansas, acoustic suspension cabinets from Boston Acoustics in New England, or affordable tower speakers from Polk Audio in Baltimore. But the battle for the premium American desktop belonged almost entirely to Framingham. Music. The scale of this dominance was visible in the retail architecture of the era. The Companion 3 and Companion 5 were not hidden in the back aisles of office supply stores next to printer ink and blank CDs. Bose secured prime, eye-level placement in the most valuable retail square footage in the country. They anchored the computer audio displays at CompUSA in Texas. They sat inside the heavily carpeted Best Buy Magnolia rooms in Chicago, the dedicated listening spaces designed to sell expensive home theaters. They were featured prominently in the Crutchfield direct mail catalog sent to millions of American homes. But their most important showroom was the Apple Store in San Francisco, New York, and across the American suburbs. In these bright, minimalist retail sanctuaries, the Bose Companion was often the only third-party speaker system trusted to sit next to a polished aluminum Mac Pro or a pristine white MacBook. To understand the scale of this cultural moment, you have to look at the specific American listening communities that adopted this system. The Companion did not just appeal to one demographic. It conquered several completely isolated audio cultures simultaneously. In the Ivy League dormitories of Cambridge, Massachusetts, physical space was the ultimate luxury. A college student could not fit a heavy stereo receiver and 2 wooden bookshelf speakers into a cramped shared room. The Companion 3 provided massive, room-filling volume from 2 tiny metallic footprints, making it the default hi-fi system for the early iTunes generation. In the independent recording studios of Nashville, Tennessee, audio engineers began keeping a set of Companion speakers next to their professional studio monitors, highly accurate speakers used to reveal mixing flaws. These engineers knew millions of Americans were listening to music on these exact Bose systems, so they used them to them as a real-world reference check to ensure a pop song or country vocal translated correctly to a premium desktop. In the financial district of Wall Street, the heavy metal control pod sat on mahogany trading desks, serving as a subtle flex of disposable income. And on the sprawling tech campuses of Palo Alto, California, software developers used the flagship Companion 5 to isolate themselves inside a massive, near-field soundstage while writing code for 12 hours a day. This widespread adoption pushed production and sales numbers to unprecedented heights for the category. While exact internal sales figures remain sealed, within the privately held Bose Corporation, industry estimates and retail data suggest that during the late 2000s and early 2010s, the Companion series held a staggering majority of the premium PC speaker market in the United States, defined as any system sold for over $150. Bose was manufacturing a premium audio component, but selling it at mass-market consumer electronics scale. This peak coincided with a massive cultural shift in how Americans acquired and stored music. In 2003, Apple launched the iTunes Music Store. Suddenly, the American computer was no longer just playing physical CDs. It was a digital jukebox holding 10,000 downloaded tracks. The requirement for a dedicated stereo rack in the living room began to crack. Why buy a CD player, a heavy integrated amplifier, and two floor-standing cabinets when your entire music library lived on a spinning hard drive on your desk? Bose rode this massive wave of digital centralization. They positioned the Companion system not as a computer accessory, but as the modern American stereo system. When a listener adjusted the heavy rubber ring of the control pod, they were not just turning up the volume of a YouTube video, they were commanding an entire digital library with a physical mechanism that felt as heavy, precise, and expensive as a high-end hi-fi volume knob. The Companion series represented the absolute zenith of the tethered desktop audio experience. In a suburban basement in Ohio or a high-rise apartment in Chicago, the desktop computer was the undisputed entertainment hub. It was the stereo, it was the theater, it was the workstation, and for a brief, shining window between the fall of the compact disc and the rise of the smartphone, the highest quality audio experience a young American might have all day was sitting motionless in an office chair, staring at a screen, while proprietary algorithms bounced phantom audio channels off their chest. In a quiet American suburb at 2 in the morning where a heavy receiver and 2 floor-standing cabinets would wake an entire house, a single worker could lean forward, touch the heavy rubber ring of a Bose control pod, and summon the illusion of a concert hall without disturbing a single wall. This was the ultimate stakes scenario of the Companion line. The physical interaction with that small, weighted disc became an American reflex. For a generation of professionals, students, and night owl creatives, the control pod was the only piece of hardware on the desk that was not designed for typing or clicking. It was a dedicated analog bridge to high fidelity. The aluminum ring stayed cold to the touch. The rotation was perfectly damped. The instant mute required only a light tap. In an era when digital interfaces were rapidly replacing physical buttons, Bose gave the American listener a volume knob that felt like it belonged on a $2,000 vintage amplifier. This tactile luxury aligned perfectly with the aesthetic peak of American desktop computing. By 2010, the integration with Apple's retail ecosystem had reached its absolute zenith. When a graphic designer in a Chicago agency or a video editor in Los Angeles bought a massive, aluminum-clad Mac Pro, the Apple Store employee did not point them toward a $20 plastic accessory. They pointed toward the Companion 5. The visual synergy was undeniable. The Companion's silver metal stands matched the computer chassis. The black grills contrasted perfectly with the glowing white screens. It matched the metal. It matched the premium cost. It matched the belief that the desk was the undisputed center of modern American life. Bose had achieved this monopoly because they understood that the American worker wanted fidelity without complexity. The Companion line did not ask the listener to calculate impedance, the electrical load a speaker presents to an amplifier. It did not require them to understand room acoustics, the way walls, Floors, ceilings, and furniture change the sound after it leaves the speaker. The heavy Acoustimass module hid the messy reality of low-frequency physics under a desk. The TrueSpace DSP chip handled the spatial geometry. The listener simply plugged in a USB cable and let the engineering do the heavy lifting. This system dominated the market exactly as the American music format underwent its final physical transition. By the late 2000s, physical compact discs were disappearing from living rooms. Millions of Americans had moved their entire music libraries to iTunes. The hard drive had replaced the CD rack. The digital download had replaced the record store. And because the desktop computer now held every album a person owned, the speakers attached to that computer had to carry the emotional weight of a primary hi-fi system. When a user in a Manhattan apartment wanted to listen to a pristine digital track, they did not walk to a stereo rack in the living room. They sat in their office chair. The computer monitor glowed. The control pod rotated. The hidden woofer pushed air against the floorboards. For a brief, incredibly lucrative window, the highest quality audio experience in an American home happened strictly within a 2-foot radius of a keyboard. The desk had become a private theater. The speaker had conquered the workspace. Yet, the very environment that created the Companion's empire was already beginning to dismantle its purpose. The collapse of the Bose Companion empire did not begin with a drop in acoustic quality, a failure on the assembly line, or the sudden arrival of a cheaper, better-sounding imported speaker. The long decline began with a structural shift in the architecture of the American workplace. The first small crack appeared not in the speaker cabinet, but in the machine it was plugged into. For a decade, the Companion system had relied on one fundamental assumption. The American computer was heavy, tethered to a wall, and permanently anchored to a piece of wooden furniture. But by the late 2000s, the anchor was lifting. In 2008, Apple introduced the MacBook Air. PC manufacturers immediately followed with their own ultra-thin laptops. The desktop computer, once the undisputed command center of the American home office, was rapidly being replaced by a machine designed to be shoved into a messenger bag. This portability shattered the near-field acoustic triangle. The Bose Companion required a listener to sit motionless in a chair, perfectly centered between two angled metallic grills, while a heavy Acoustimass module sat permanently on the floorboards beneath them. But the modern American worker no longer sat in one place. They carried their laptop to the kitchen counter, to the living room couch, to the conference room, and to the local coffee shop. The computer had become mobile, but the $399 hi-fi system attached to it was bound by power cables, thick USB wires, and a massive subwoofer footprint. If the audio source constantly left the desk, the premium speakers left behind quickly became expensive paperweights. As the hardware changed, the physical environment of the American professional underwent an even more violent transformation. Force 5, technological, retail, and listening culture shift, had fully arrived, fundamentally rewriting the rules of corporate real estate. Following the 2008 financial crisis, companies in Silicon Valley, Manhattan, and Austin sought to maximize their expensive office square footage. They began tearing down the high-walled cubicles that had defined the 1990s workspace. In their place, corporate America embraced the open-plan office, a workspace architecture devoid of dividing walls, designed to pack dozens of workers around long, shared tables in the name of collaboration. Acoustically, the open-plan office was a disaster. It was a chaotic, echoing environment filled with the overlapping frequencies of ringing phones, clattering mechanical keyboards, and loudly talking executives. In this new shared space, the privacy required to listen to music evaporated. In a private, high-walled cubicle, a worker could turn the heavy metal ring of a Bose control pod and fill their personal bubble with a pristine stereo image. In an open-plan office, playing audio through external desktop speakers, no matter how beautifully engineered, was no longer a luxury. It was a severe social violation. You could not fire up the True Space DSP chip and bounce acoustic reflections around a room when your coworker was sitting 30 inches away on a Zoom call. The heavy premium control pod, which had once been the tactile crown jewel of the American desktop, simply stopped turning. The worker was forced to mute the system. The desk had not lost its capacity for high fidelity, but the listener had lost the social permission to hear it. To survive the open plan office, the American worker desperately needed an acoustic shield. They did not need to push sound out into the room. They needed to block the room from getting in. They needed isolation. And this created the ultimate devastating paradox of the Bose Companion's decline. The product that completely destroyed the market for premium American desktop speakers was designed inside the exact same Framingham laboratories. While one team of Bose engineers had spent the 2000s perfecting the illusion of vast space for the desktop, another team was perfecting the science of active noise cancellation. In 2009, Bose released the Quiet Comfort 15, a pair of premium headphones that used external microphones to read the ambient noise of a room and instantly feed an opposite audio signal into the listener's ears to cancel it out. The Quiet Comfort line was a revelation for the American professional. For roughly the exact same price as a flagship Companion 5 system, an office worker could buy a pair of QC15 headphones and instantly erase the chaotic noise of their open-plan environment. The headphones provided the high-fidelity music they wanted while simultaneously returning the privacy the modern office had stolen from them. The transition was absolute. In corporate offices across the United States, the angled metal grills of the Companion speakers began to vanish from the desks, replaced by a pair of silver headphones resting next to the keyboard. The headphones did not require a heavy subwoofer, they did not require a dedicated power outlet, and most importantly, when the worker closed their laptop and walked to a conference room, the headphones went with them. Bose had successfully monopolized the American desk, only to realize that the desk itself was becoming obsolete. The company was perfectly positioned to capture the new headphone market, but in doing so, they actively cannibalized their own desktop empire. The American listeners still wanted premium audio while they worked, but they no longer wanted to share it with the room. While noise-canceling headphones solved the acoustic chaos of the open-plan corporate office, a different technology destroyed the American home office setup. Force 5, technological retail and listening culture shift, struck again, this time eliminating the need for audio cables entirely. By the early 2010s, the portable Bluetooth speaker, a compact device that receives sound wirelessly from a phone or computer, had evolved from a novelty into a dominant retail category. Companies like Ultimate Ears and JBL introduced rugged, battery-powered cylinders that could fill a room with sound. And then in 2013, Bose introduced the SoundLink Mini. The SoundLink Mini was a heavy, extruded aluminum brick that produced shocking amounts of bass for its size. It retailed for roughly $200. It did not require a separate acoustic module hidden under the desk. It did not require a dedicated wall outlet. It did not require a thick USB cable routing back to a heavy computer tower. It simply sat beneath a monitor, played music wirelessly from a laptop, and could be tossed into a backpack when the worker left for the weekend. The convenience was intoxicating. The American listener realized they no longer needed to tether themselves to a rigid near-field triangle to hear premium audio while they typed. Simultaneously, the hardware ecosystem that had once supported the Companion line turned actively hostile. The Companion 5 and Companion 20 were tethered systems. They demanded physical ports, but the American computer industry was waging a relentless war on wires. Apple, the same company whose retail stores had elevated the Bose Companion to a cultural status symbol, began aggressively stripping legacy ports from their laptops. The optical CD drive disappeared first, then the traditional USB-A ports were eliminated, in favor of ultra-thin USB-C connections. By the mid-2010s, an American professional buying a new MacBook Pro discovered that plugging in their premium Bose Companion 5 required an ugly, dangling plastic dongle. The premium minimalist aesthetic of the metal satellite stands was suddenly ruined by a mess of white adapters. The clean desktop was now tangled. The wired connection, which had once guaranteed high fidelity and zero latency, was suddenly perceived as an outdated liability. This hardware shift mirrored a massive change in consumer behavior. The American desk was no longer a fixed entertainment hub. The music library had migrated from the local computer hard drive to the smartphone via streaming services like Spotify and Apple Music. The computer was strictly for work. The phone was for audio. A heavy desktop speaker system tied exclusively to a computer motherboard felt fundamentally obsolete. If a user wanted sound in their home office, they bought a portable Bluetooth speaker or a voice-controlled smart speaker like the Amazon Echo. The smart speaker did not image perfectly. It did not bounce acoustic reflections to create a massive, detailed soundstage. It only needed to sound good enough in a room where the buyer no longer sat exactly dead center between two angled grills. The cheaper wireless speaker did not need to be a hi-fi component. It just needed to be convenient. Inside Framingham, the corporate calculus shifted. Bose Corporation watched the retail data. The massive profits were no longer in wired multimedia speakers. The future belonged to true wireless earbuds, noise-canceling headwear, and portable Bluetooth cylinders. The Companion line, which had required complex DSP engineering, expensive raw materials, and heavy shipping weights, was quietly sidelined. There was no grand press release announcing the end of the desktop hi-fi era. The retreat was slow and silent. The mid-tier Companion 3 was retired. The flagship Companion 5 stayed on the market for years, but its internal architecture aged while the rest of the audio world went wireless. The entry-level Companion 2 remained available as a budget option, but the prestige of the heavy metal control pod and the invisible Acoustimass module was gone. Forced 2, hi-fi dealers, big box retail and online price pressure. Accelerated the final exit. The physical retail landscape could no longer justify the floor space. Best Buy began shrinking its dedicated computer accessory aisles to make room for smart home devices and mobile phone accessories. The Apple Store, once the greatest showroom for the Companion series, cleared its third-party accessory tables to display its own wireless AirPods and HomePod smart speakers. The physical retail shelf space, required to display a heavy subwoofer and two metal stands, was simply too expensive to maintain for a product category that was rapidly shrinking. Without retail visibility, without hardware ports to plug into, and without a captive audience sitting motionless in an office chair, the system had nowhere left to go. The transition from component audio to wireless convenience was complete. The market moved. The desk cleared. The ports vanished. The cables became adapters. The Apple Store dropped the box. The Best Buy shelf went to Bluetooth. The Framingham assembly line stopped. The metal grills disappeared. The heavy rubber rings stopped turning. The American desk had gone completely silent. The sound was still pure, the drivers were still intact, but the desk had moved into the air. The physical manufacturing lines in Framingham have long since gone dark. The parent corporation has long since pivoted its engineering talent toward wireless noise-canceling headphones, wearable audio gear, and massive outdoor sound systems. Yet in the secondary market across the United States, the Bose Companion series refuses to quietly fade away. On eBay, on Facebook Marketplace, and deep inside digital enthusiast communities like Reddit's RA Budget Audiophile, these vintage multimedia systems remain fiercely hunted objects. A new generation of collectors, college students, and home office workers regularly hunt down old Companion 3 and Companion 5 sets. They do not buy them for vintage aesthetic novelty alone. They buy them because a well-maintained heavy set of desktop speakers built 20 years ago still achieves something modern. Minimalist audio often fails to deliver physical presence. A pair of small wireless smart speakers sitting on a modern desk often relies on heavy digital compression, tiny micro drivers, and cloud-based EQ algorithms to trick the ear into hearing low-end punch. By contrast, a Bose Companion system relies on raw, dedicated physical architecture. The heavy wooden Acoustimass module sitting under the desk moves actual air across the floorboards. The physical analog circuitry and the early DSP TrueSpace chips create a wide, distinct soundstage that doesn't drop out when the Wi-Fi stutters. When a listener replaces a deteriorated rubber foam surround on an old woofer, or cleans out scratchy contacts on a weighted control pod, they are participating in a quiet act of audio preservation. What remains today at the historic corporate footprints in Framingham, Massachusetts, is a different kind of landscape. The sprawling corporate offices and engineering laboratories that once birthed groundbreaking psychoacoustic research have evolved. Some buildings have been redeveloped. Others house entirely different high-tech enterprises. The local retail showrooms where thousands of Americans first heard the shock of high-fidelity desktop sound have been replaced by mobile phone kiosks and minimalist product tables. Yet, a fascinating surprise footnote survives within the modern American audio engineering community. Many independent music producers, video editors, and digital creators still keep a battered, decades-old pair of Bose Companion 20 or Companion 5 speakers plugged into a secondary testing rig on their studio benches. They do not use them because they are flat, ultra-precise studio reference monitors. They keep them because they represent the exact acoustic environment of millions of American consumers. If a mix sounds warm, wide, and balanced through an old pair of Bose desktop satellites, it will translate correctly in almost any home in America. The story of the Bose Companion is ultimately a reflection of how America builds, sells, and discards its relationship with sound. It reveals a recurring truth about consumer culture. Americans will pay absolute premium prices for high fidelity, but only if the technology demands zero friction. When the speakers were easy to plug in, when the heavy metal control pod sat ready by the keyboard, and when the desktop was the undisputed center of daily life. Millions of people were willing to spend $400 on a peripheral. But when the American workspace shifted from private cubicles to open-plan offices, when laptops replaced heavy desktop towers, and when wireless convenience and active noise cancellation conquered the market, the physical tether became a liability. The market did not reject the sound of the Companion series because it lacked quality. It rejected the wires because the way Americans lived and worked had fundamentally moved on. The engineering was real, the cabinets were heavy, the soundstage was vast. Somewhere in a quiet suburban home office, a pair of angled gray grills still stands beside a glowing monitor, the rubber ring of its control pod worn smooth by 20 years of work. Ready to play one more track before the screen goes dark. See you in the next video.